Hi, seventh graders, back with Mrs. Harper as we continue with our next story in our book, The Canterbury Tales. We are going to hear from the wife of Bath, and she's been described so far in our journey, and we'll talk a little bit more about her just in a second. But I'm going to send you back a couple pages, and remember how Geoffrey Chaucer sets up his stories is he has a person tell the story, and then after they're done telling the story, the pilgrims who've heard the story all kind of respond. And then that gets the next person lined up for their next story. So I'm going to go back a few pages and we're going to hear, we are not going to read the scholar's tale, but we're going to start with the introduction into the wife of Bath. So I am on the bottom of page 48. And as I'm reading, I really want you to think and I really want you to focus on how does Geoffrey Chaucer paint us or characterize, we've talked about that, how does he give us characterization, enough information on the person, the character of the wife of Bath? What do we know about her? As I'm going to read to you in a couple minutes here, what's the introduction that we get about her before she tells her story? So I'm going to read the introduction to her. This is after the scholar's tale, before she begins to tell her story. So I love the way Geoffrey Chaucer introduces us. He doesn't hit us over the head with it, but he hints at, so us as the readers have to make our inferences and our guesses on what kind of person she is. He does a really great job. Please follow along as I read today. At the bottom of page 48. You're clearly a woman after my own heart, called the monk, cantering up to the widow's side. I'm after nobody's heart, you rascally womanizer. I've won the hearts of 5 husbands, and that's enough to weary any woman. Now I'm free to think and say what I like, thanks be to God. She eased a heavy rug around her ample hips, and her plump legs poked forwards in the stirrups. She was wearing red woolen stockings and soft leather shoes. I suspect she was richer than all of us put together. Before I continue on, you should be painting as a reader. You should be picturing in your head. Chaucer's setting the stage. He's getting us to paint a scene of what that person looks like. She's had 5 husbands. She's a rather big woman. She's wearing very rich clothes for the time. And in fact, he makes a statement. I suspect she's richer than all of us, all the pilgrims together on that journey put together. So really important information. I read on. The partner suspected the same thing. He edged closer, clearly intending to sponge money from her. Speak up, young man, she bawled at him, or is it a young lady? The partner was hardened to insults by years of scrounging. I see your 5 husbands left you well provided for, madam. I dare say you can afford to pay a glimpse of the treasures I've got in the bag of mine. Provided for? The widow was incensed. I earned my bacon. I will have you know, you long-eared gelding. The merchant told me later that she had earned the money in the weaving trade. Her looms produced the best woolen cloth in all of Bath. And as for your treasures, she was telling the partner, whose fawning grin was starting to droop, no man of mine ever kept his treasures in a bag, nor did I ever pay to look at them. The only treasure a woman can give a man is to love him as a cat loves her kittens, with the ruff of her tongue. And the only treasure a man can bring a woman is, well, you know what that is. Oh, to be sure, said the monk, leering. A kiss and a squeeze. The knight's son was shocked. Really, sir? From a man of the church, too? Of course the lady didn't mean that. He means he's talking about kissing and sexual. Well, I didn't mean Chuck, said the widow kindly. The only treasures a man can bring a lady are his love and adoration, said the squire solemnly. She looked at him fondly, reached out and tousled his curly hair. Bless you, son, haven't you heard the old story? I will tell you what a woman wants most from her man. And so that begins the introduction to the story that she's going to tell. Now, what have we learned about the widower so far? She's had 5 husbands. We don't know why she's had so many. And she is extremely wealthy because her husband, and then when they died, she inherited money, or she had money from owning this cloth company. And most of the stuff was written, tapestries were spent, and having cloth and expensive fabrics was something that the elite, the high up people, paid for. And so obviously this woman is very well off. Okay. She also doesn't feel too bad that she's been a widow, and takes um, she takes offense that the partner is trying to suck up to her and trying to get her money. And she said, "Listen, I've earned my money, and you're not getting it because I don't believe you." So she kind of insults the partner right then and there before she even begins the story. Okay, we are now on page 52, and we're going to hear her story. Now, ladies of the class, you are finally going to hear a story from a woman's point of view. All of our other stories have been told from men. But thinking about what you know, what is your background knowledge, seventh graders, of what gender roles were like during this time? Were women treated equally as men? Absolutely not. Girls were considered, no matter where you were in the hierarchy, girls were always considered the property of first their fathers and then their husbands. And they didn't typically own a lot of property. When their husband passed on, if they had sons, the money went to that son, and maybe he took care of his mother. Most likely he did, if he could afford to. And women were passed on from to being taken care of most of the time. Okay. So we're going to hear the story of this woman who doesn't need anyone to take care of her. She's had 5 husbands, and she's very well off financially. She also is a very strong woman with many opinions, if you haven't already picked up on that. Here we go. Page 52, The Wife of Bath's Tale, What Women Most Desire. In the old days of glory, when King Arthur's round table stood in Camelot, chivalrous knights sat and talked of love. Damsels embroidered tokens of love, squires composed love songs, and jousts were fought over love. Hardly a word was spoken that was not of love. Only when men and women met did they talk about the weather instead. How blue the sky is, lady, a young man would say. Oh, and how warm the breeze, she would reply. And how is your mother? He would ask. Quite well, considering the weather, she would answer. And then he would bow, and she would smile, and they would go off their separate ways. So it was at Camelot until the hot-blooded Sir Savio met one day with a lady in the woods, in a wood. How blue the sky is today, said the lady, smiling encouragingly. Almost as blue as your lovely eyes, lady, he said. The lady blushed. How prettily the water glistens in the brook. Almost as sweet to taste a kiss of your lips, said the knight, and he helped himself to a kiss. The lady picked up her green skirt and shrieked and swooped like a parrot in and out of the trees, all the way back to the court. Now, seventh graders, what did he do? He stole a kiss as a way for him to say what we would say today is he sexually assaulted this woman. He didn't ask permission. They only just started speaking, and he kissed her. And she's pretty offended. And back she goes to where she came from. Continuing on, top of page 51. So the over-romantic knight was summoned before the assembly of the Round Table. This most starless of knights, said King Arthur, has cast his shadow over an honorable lady in the wood. What punishment should he suffer? Now, seventh graders, remember, the knights of this time had a chivalrous code. You wrote that in your notebooks 2 lessons ago. Honor and respect and treatment of women and children, always of the best moral character. And this knight hasn't really portrayed that very well. And the king of the county where this offense took place is very offended. Back to their book. In one voice the knights cried, Death, cut off his head! Sir Savio was most dismayed, but he bowed low from the waist, and Arthur unsheathed his sword. One last question, said the knight, straightening up again. Perhaps the excellent Queen Guinevere can tell me what exactly did I do to offend the lady in the wood? What did you do? Exclaimed the queen. You spoke of kisses when you should have been talking about the weather. Ah, I see. Sir Salvio sighed and bowed from the waist again. I don't think I understand women. The shadow of the sword touched his bare neck. The ladies of the court began to faint. Like swaths of corn behind a sickle, they fell daintily to the floor. The queen herself looked with regret on Sir Salvio. His hair was a colored sage and as curly as the tendrils of honeysuckle. Well, well, she said, fluttering her hands, since this young man seems to understand women, let him answer this riddle. Let him tell me what women most desire, and he shall live. Arthur leaned wearily on his sword. You have 1 year and 1 day, boy, in which to discover what women most desire. As Sir Salvio left the court, his knees trembled and his heart pounded. What chance did he stand of answering the queen's riddle? Now, seventh graders, you understand, the queen has basically spared him his life for 1 year and 1 day, and she's given him a quest. He's off on a quest to find out what women want. The king was going to cut his head right off right there, but the queen gave him this reprieve, it's called. So he's got 1 year and 1 day to come up with the answer to her question. He's due back in court at that time with his answer. So now off he goes to figure this out. Back to our book. As Sir Savio left the court, his knees trembled and his heart pounded. What chance did he stand of answering the queen's riddle? What man can guess what a woman is thinking? What do women most desire? He pondered as his horse shambled along the country roads. Beauty, surely. But then he remembered money. Surely women wanted gold more than anything in the world. He passed a young farm on the road, arm in arm. He passed a young farm girl on the road, arm in arm with a shepherd. Tell me, good girl, what do you want most in this world? To be rich or to be beautiful? The farm girl hung more heavily on the shepherd's arm and sighed, Neither, sir. All I want is to be married. Aha! The knight took out a quill and wrote on the sleeve of his shirt. Then he turned back, thinking to take the answer to the queen at once. On the way, he passed a convent where nuns, as white as cannikins of milk in the morning sun, were tending a field of beans. What that girl told me cannot be true, thought Sir Salvio with dismay. So many women choose to be unmarried. Just then he passed a roadside shrine. In front of it, a woman was down on her knees, praying fervently. Forgive me for interrupting your prayers, said Sir Savio, but what is it that you ask so earnestly of God? The woman got painfully to her feet and took up her baskets again. Only what every woman wants, I suppose, she said bitterly. I want to have a baby. Aha, he said, and he noted his words on his sleeve. By sunset, there were 12 other notes written on it. Sir Savio's heart sank lower and lower. Only one answer could be right. How was he to choose it from the rest? He fingered his bare neck and thought of the sword awaiting it. Further and further afield he traveled. Taking ships, he sailed to hot and passionate country where gypsy women dressed in scarlet and their dark skins sweated as they danced the tarantas under a tambourine moon, sorry. What do women most desire? He asked a girl as she whirled past his stirrups, tossing her lace-edged petticoats. Fun, of course, cried the gypsy. Fun and laughter and love and music and passion and the clash of the moon and the spark of the skies and to stay young forever. Thank you very much. He could find no scrap of sleeve on which to write all her answers. On he traveled, through lands of ice where women would not part their frozen lips to answer him, through wastelands where all the women wanted was the next meal for their children. Finally, his time ran short and he turned back to keep his appointment with the king's deadline. To be one day late at Camelot would dishonor him, for the other knights would think he was fearful of the sword's edge. So it was that he came to be riding at a gallop through the forest of Dean on the last days, when he saw an old crone boiling up water in a cauldron. "Old woman," he shouted, "boil my shirt, for I have slept in it the past year, and today I must present myself in front of the Queen of England." He handed her the shirt, on which he had scrawled the answer of every woman he had met. The old hag held up the sleeves. "What's this, then?" She lisped through two black teeth. "Love, money, passion, power, beauty, children, long life, fame. These are all the stuff of women's wishes. Mind your own business, Weasley one, and boil the shirt. I'm sick and tired of asking what women most desire." The shirt plunged into the cauldron, and the bubbles that rose gave strangely feminine sighs. "What women most desire? Oh, I can tell you that, lording. But my answer has a price. What I desire most is to marry a handsome knight with hair of just your colors and curls of just your kind. If I were to tell you the answer, you would have to marry me." "I'll gladly marry even you, Dame Cockroach, for the sake of the right answer. But I've heard so many now that I dare say I've already heard yours from somebody else." The old crone shrugged her humped shoulders and gave him back his shirt, dripping and steaming. "What women most desire is to have their own way in everything," she said. "Fine, fine." Sir Salvio galloped off, intent on keeping his appointment with the queen. Knee to knee at the round table, the knights of King Arthur sat playing cards. The ladies sat talking of love among themselves. "I hardly expected to see you again, boys," said the king. The women's chatter subsided. The knights at the table turned to listen. "And have you found the answer to my riddle?" asked the queen. Sir Savio knelt and kissed the hem of her robes. "Madam, I have 1,000." Then he searched his shirt sleeve for just one that might save his life. That the shiny whiteness of the linen almost blinded him, and these were clean of words. So was his memory a blank. The only answer he could have recollected was the last one he had been told. What women most desire is to have their own way in everything. "Oh, sorcery!" squawked the queen in delicious horror. "No man ever worked that out for himself. I'm glad you have saved your life, Sir Savio, for your hair is the color of powdered sage and as curly as the tendril of honeysuckle. But who told you the answer?" "I did, Queen Guinevere," croaked an elderly voice. And there, perched on the back of the knight's horse, where it stood tethered by the door, was the old forest crone. Her legs were as thin and knobbled as a chicken's. Ooh, sensory image, painting a picture in our head. Here and there she had hair, but it grew only where it should not. The ladies of the court put their handkerchiefs to their mouth and gave little cries of distaste. "I told this fair knight the answer, and in return he promised to marry me. Don't look surprised to see me, sweetheart. I jumped up behind you as you put on your shirt. I did not want to delay our marriage by so much a single day." In a gesture of wild despair, Sir Savio threw himself headlong at King Arthur's feet. "Lord, be merciful and cut off my head here and now, for life would be worse than death if I have to marry this. Sir," the queen's voice was loud and forbidding, "kindly remember that chivalry is the first law of this court." But the knight bared his neck and thrust his sword into King Arthur's hands. "Please cut off my head, your majesty." Like a monstrous land crab, half in and half out of its skin, the hag limped forward. Nay, for that would deprive me of my reward. I claim my husband, and the law must give him to me. Then Sir Savio threw himself at her pigeon-toed feet. Take my horse, take my sword, take my armor, take everything I own in this world, but spare me my body. You don't know how I have dreamed of one day tasting love in the arms of a young and lovely wife. The antique bride gave one wild shriek of laughter and linked her arm through his. I'm yours to command now, husband, she said. Yours as much as your horse and your sword or the shirt on your back. Then the king joined the hands of the bride and the groom. I give you the white wing of Camelot for your nuptial marriage home. Never was there a wedding celebrated with fewer smiles and less dancing. The groom led his bride directly to the white wing, thinking to hide his shame within its walls. At the foot of the stairs, she tugged at his arm. This is the threshold of our home, she said in a voice that crackled like burning stubble. So lift me in your arms and carry me over the threshold. Sharp with bones as heavy as brass. She weighed like a ship's anchor in his arms, but he carried her to their bedchamber and laid her on the white bed. I'll sleep in the next room, lady. Nay, for then we will not be married. Man and wife shall sleep in the same bed. Sir Savio laid down beside her in his clothes, staring at the ceiling, and tears ran down his cheeks. Beside him, she smiled a toothless and frothy smile. Is this any way to behave on your wedding night? She said. What have I done? Tell me, sweetheart. Nothing but save your life by answering the queen's riddle? What's the matter with me, love? What's the matter with you? He gave a great groan. Oh, nothing you could alter, lady. You're an ugly old washerwoman, that's all. She gave another of those sarcophagus laughs. Oh, is it my ugliness then? Why, I thought you'd be glad. He lifted himself up on one elbow and stared at her, his eyes blinded with tears. Glad? Yes, glad. A pretty wife is often a worry to a man. All the time he's fighting or questing or taking his horse to the blacksmith. He has it in his mind to wonder what is she doing now? Which of my friends is flirting with her? Has she run off with my squire or my serving man? He nodded his head and smiled forlornly. In all my travels during the last year, I have not met one pretty woman that I would trust. And he closed his eyes in despair. And when he opened them again, there on the bed beside him, in a gown of green velvet that put him in mind of cedar trees, laid the lady of his dreams. Her hair was the color of powdered honeysuckle, and she smelt of sage. Only in the days of glory, where fairies were as many as the motes of dust floating in a sunbeam, could a man have found himself married to a fairy. Yes, it is I, said the washerwoman from the forest. The washerwoman from the forest, said the fairy bride. And now the choice is yours. Would you have me like this, or in my other form? Shall I be ugly, but love you truly all the days of my life? Or shall I be beautiful and a worry to you each night of your life? Shall I be waiting here for your every evening, bent and crooked, but loving and loyal? Or shall I be beautiful when I hang on your arm in the gardens and in the great moot hall when there are other eyes to wink at me? Come on, decide now and never speak of it again. In all of his travels, he had never seen such so lovely a lady. Sir Savio breathed in to claim her beauty. Yes, yes, he would have her be beautiful. Then he suddenly thought of the white sleep he would lose lying in the white wing of the Camelot while his wife was dancing the night away with other men. He thought of how the bright light of her beauty would show up all the lines and wrinkles of his old age, and she would tire of him, and he thought of the evil of owning a lovely wife without owning her love. Lady Fairy and wife of my life, he said at last, since I today learned today what women most desire, I know that you, not I, must choose. Be beautiful or be good. It shall be as you desire. The fairy gave one wild whoop of laughter and put her arms around his neck. Her mouth was a well of kisses. Because you gave this answer, she said, you may have me in my fairy shape and keep my love and loyalty always. I will be a good and faithful, and I will be always waiting for you here in the white wing of Camelot. For never in the history of human beings has a man learned so quickly what women most desire. So every night in the white wing of Camelot resounded to their laughter, and during the day Sir Savio was the envy of every other knight, for he had a wife who never talked about the weather, and who liked nothing better than a kiss in the woods from her beloved knight. Fairies and wizardry, exclaimed Hubert the monk with a bustling contempt. They're all part of the past, and that's just where they belong. That's the end of the story. Now they're back, after the wife has told the tale. And now all of the pilgrims who have listened to that tale don't quite believe the story. Let me read that part again, because I didn't pause last time. Sorry. Fairies and wizardly, exclaimed Hubert the monk with blustering contempt. They're all in the past, and that's where they all belong. The past? The past, bawled the widow. The fairies aren't dead and gone. It's just that they immigrated when the monks and priests outnumbered them. I tell you this, scandalous man, I trust a leprechaun sooner than a priest. A man who won't marry knows nothing about women, and a woman who knows nothing about women, and a man who knows nothing about women is more ignorant than Adam in the Garden of Eden. Give me a marrying man every time. Their noisy arguing woke the magistrate with a start. Silence in court, he shouted. That woman, if I had her in my court, scolds, bridle, duck her in the village pond. That's what. The monk and the widow took no notice. Tell me, jeered the monk, wagging his gleaming, sun-tanned head, when you were married to your 5 unfortunate husbands, did you ever wear your spurs in bed? The widow in the hat cupped one hand to her ear and said, what did the fool say? Silence in court. And that concludes our story from the wife of Bath. What do you think of her? Strong character, doesn't need no man to tell her what to do and how to do it. What do you think of the story she told? Truth to it? What's the moral or the theme and the theme of the story? Okay. All right, good thinking. Today you're going to be joining me for our Zoom where we're going to be doing a few activities with this story. So please make sure that you've completely listened through the whole tape and followed along. But if you're at this point, you probably have done that. Remember, it is Monday, and so we will see you during our regular now Monday meeting time, which is once a week, which is at 1 o'clock. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.